Anybody online? Okay, so you're going to send out a message that, yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nidvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Grantha Raja Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we're continuing our discussion from yesterday, and our homework for today was research the statement, faith always precedes knowledge, and give references from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam which support this statement. For example, one reference, 116, Srimad Bhagavatam 1st Canto, 16th chapter, 20th verse, and Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, 2nd to 6th verse. And point number 2, write the different levels of devotees based on their faith. So, I'm going to read first the homework submitted by Sanmukh, and then the homework submitted by Shrestha, and then the homework submitted by Shivani. And then I'm gonna read a letter by Srila Prabhupada, which is an amazing letter that solidifies and this principle that faith always precedes knowledge, but where should you place your faith? That's the question. And Prabhupada makes it very, very clear in this letter he wrote in the 1960s to one of his disciples, Srimad Maharaj, that a faith should be in Bhagavad Gita. Unflinching faith should be in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so we begin with Sanmukh's homework. So he says, research the statement, faith always precedes knowledge, and give references from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam which support this statement. And I gave the hints, Srimad Bhagavatam 1, 16, 20, and Bhagavad Gita chapter 17.2 onward. Okay. So Sanmukh begins. The dictionary definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. That's the first definition. The second definition is strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. This, of course, is a nonsense definition. They always want to make fun of people who believe in scriptures. So it says strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension. That means fear. Apprehension used in this context means fear rather than proof. So that's complete nonsense. But anyway, that's the way they define it in the dictionary. And then Sanmukh continues. There are two types of faith that needs to be developed by a person. One is transcendental faith, paramartika shraddha. Shraddha is the word that means faith in Sanskrit. And second is mundane faith, lokika shraddha. Good, Sanmukh. That's nice research. So first is the mundane faith he's going to discuss. Without faith, we cannot trust a barber, a car driver, or even a friend who has been with you since kindergarten. Therefore, we can understand that without faith, we cannot move an inch. This is called mundane faith. If one has faith in the mundane knowledge, it will be tainted by the defects of human nature. Okay. There's a famous saying that one man is speaking to his close friend. He says, "You know, John, I don't really believe what I hear in the news, and I don't really believe people's opinions, and I don't really believe everything I read in books. You know why?" And John said, "Nope, I don't." And he says, "Because I don't trust anyone." John says, "Oh, wait a minute. I'm your best friend. You don't trust me?" He says, and then his friend says, "Oh, I mean, I don't trust anyone except you, John." And John feels a lot better. He said, "Oh, thank you." He said, and then his friend says, "But I got my doubts about you also." Which means he doesn't trust anybody. So that's the position of a lot of people today. They don't trust anybody. They've lost faith in everything. So such a person is in a hopeless position. They're basically, everything they hear, everything they see, everything they think is doubtful. And eventually, with such an extreme position, they become paranoid and fearful to do anything. See, that's that's what you would call, and this is a nice example, the worm that makes the silkworm makes a cocoon. You can look this up. I want your homework for next week is look up the life cycle of the silkworm. Now, the life cycle of a silkworm is at one point it makes a cocoon, an entrapment. It builds its own entrapment by making this cocoon, this sort of like ovulated circular type of structure around itself, and it sort of entraps itself in this cocoon, and in the cocoon it meditates on becoming like a butterfly, and eventually it does. So let me just make sure what I'm saying is a fact here. We're going to look up the life cycle, CYCLE, of a silkworm. Let's see what it says. Okay, so I'm looking on the internet right now, and there is a drawing of the life cycle. And let me see if I can make it bigger. It says silkworm life cycle. And okay, so that's your homework. I just wanted to make sure you could find it. It says life cycle of a silkworm. Silk is a natural fiber which comes from the cocoons of silkworms, which are the larvae of the mulberry silk moth, Bombyx mori. A female moth lays 300 to 500 tiny eggs, and after around 10 days, the larvae, silkworms, hatch. After their final molt, you have to look up what the word molt means, M-O-L-T, the silkworm builds a cocoon around itself. Okay, so that's important. Building that cocoon around itself. So a person who doesn't trust anyone, has no faith in scriptures, no faith in anything, no faith in the words of pundits or politicians and so forth, they end up building this cocoon or this enclosure that they get trapped in. And therefore, if one does not have any faith at all in anything, they become paranoid. Look that word up, Paranoid, paranoid, and they doubt everything, and they end up becoming cynical, cynical, of everything they hear, including scripture, and paranoid, cynical, and eventually hopeless. It's a diseased state of mind. Okay, so Samuk continues, mundane faith. Without faith, we cannot trust a barber, a car driver, or even a friend who has been with you since kindergarten. Therefore, we can understand that without faith, we cannot move an inch. This is called mundane faith. If one has faith in a mundane knowledge, he'll be tainted by the defects of human nature. Very good, Sanmuk. This mundane knowledge means basing everything in our imperfect mind and senses. And now he says transcendental faith. He defines transcendental faith is more sturdy than mundane knowledge because the higher source is not subject to the four defects. Excellent. The higher source is Krishna, the highest source. He doesn't say that, but it's implied. As one advances spiritually, one's faith gradually increases. Gradually, the faith will help in acquiring knowledge. So faith precedes knowledge. Okay. Well, the main point he's making is, as one advances spiritually, one's faith gradually increases. Now, what does it mean to advance spiritually? That is the fundamental question. Well, to advance spiritually means to advance in purification. So the whole spiritual process is purifying. One purifies all doubts by hearing explanations from Krishna and the acharyas who simply repeat Krishna's explanations without changing them. And the more we hear Krishna's explanations and we accept them on faith in the beginning, and as we experience life, we see that our faith was not misplaced, that it was rightly placed in the statements of Krishna rather than the statements of imperfect people who are just mostly speculating. So it says here, as one advances spiritually, one's faith gradually increases. The more one becomes purified by chanting, dancing, Prabhupada says, our dancing is also scientific. Imagine what an amazing statement that is. Our dancing is also scientific. When you dance in front of the deities, you do the Prabhupada two-step. He says it's scientific. Yes, because if it pleases Krishna, then it's scientific. If you dance for the pleasure of the Lord, it's scientific. That means it's eternally true. If you sing, you chant the names of Krishna for the pleasure of the Lord, it's scientific. It's eternally true. If you hear the words of Krishna sincerely with faith, it's scientific because the process works. You'll become purified by following Krishna's instructions. So then he says, there's another term known as blind faith. Blind faith is a faith which we show on a person or object or anything without actually trying to understand. Blind faith in the material world is dangerous, while blind faith in the spiritual world is mandatory. For example, if a trusted friend is in need of money, then one will help because he has a faith that the friend will return his money. However, this faith comes from the knowledge that the friend can be trusted upon. In this case, knowledge precedes faith. Sanmukh, I want to tell you frankly, it doesn't always work like that. But anyway, there's another saying. It says, "Don't ever loan money to your friend, because you might lose a friend." Yeah, what if the friend doesn't pay you back? Then you would be really hurt. So it's better, when anyone ever asks you to loan them money, is to give them some money and say, "Friend, you keep this. This is a gift. I don't expect you to return it to me." That way, you'll never be let down. Anyway, that's not an absolute truth, but it's an idea that you will not always be paid back, even if you loan money to friends or relatives. So you have to understand that. If you say it's an absolute truth that I believe in, I will always be paid back, especially if it's a relative or a friend. Well, no. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that. So don't put your blind faith in friends or relatives. If you're going to have blind faith, and no, you don't want blind faith. You want faith that's supported by experience and also by the fact that you're putting your faith in the words of Krishna. Krishna will never let you down. Relatives, friends, acquaintances, this thing, that thing, there's always a possibility that you're going to be let down. But if you put your faith in Krishna and Krishna's words, you'll never be let down. I can guarantee you that. Okay, so you say faith comes from the knowledge that the friend can be trusted upon. In this case, faith, knowledge precedes faith. No, that's nonsense. I'm sorry, that's not exactly truth. Because your friend could let you down. Your relative could let you down. I'm not saying every friend or every relative would never pay you back, but I know many examples of relatives and friends who never paid their friend back, even though they promised. But if we serve the Lord with blind faith, then we are eternally benefited, which also helps in acquiring knowledge. So, in case of transcendental faith, faith always precedes knowledge. Well, there's an interesting story that Prabhupada tells, and that is about a Brahmana and a cobbler. One day, Narada Muni was going to see Narayana in the spiritual world. And as he was proceeding on his way, he met a Brahmana. And when he told the Brahmana that he was going to see Narayana in the spiritual world, the Brahmana said, "Oh, wonderful, Narayana is my Lord. Can you ask him when I will go back to the spiritual world?" I expect the answer will be at the end of this life, because I've been a Brahmana my whole life. And Narada Muni said, "Yes, sir, I will do that." And as he proceeded on his way, he passed a cobbler. A cobbler is a shoemaker. He's always dealing in skins, animal skins, to make shoes. And Narada said, "Hello, cobbler." He said, and the cobbler said, "Oh, Narada Muni, you're such a great saint." And he was very respectful of Narada Muni. And Narada Muni told him that he was on his way to see Narayana in the spiritual world. And the cobbler said, "Oh, my dear Lord Narayana, I love my Lord." And Narada said, "So, would you like me to ask something?" on your behalf. And he said, oh, okay, ask him, when I come back to the spiritual world. He said, okay, I will ask. So Narada goes to the spiritual world. He meets Narayana, and before he leaves, he asks about the Brahmana and the cobbler. So Lord Narayana or Lord Krishna says, yes, I know this Brahmana. And so Narada says, so when will he come back to Godhead? And he said, not for many hundreds and thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands of lifetimes. And Narada was shocked. Because the Brahmana, is always engaged in doing rituals and chanting mantras and etc. And he said, well, what about this cobbler? You know this cobbler? And Narayana said, oh yeah, I know him. He's coming back this lifetime. So that was even more shocking, because the cobbler is dealing with skins, animal skins, and making them into shoes and other leather products. And usually such people are considered very low class. So Narada says, okay, well, I'm going to go back and tell them. And then Narayana says, well, wait a minute. He says, when you tell the cobbler, when you tell the Brahmana and the cobbler, if they ask you what I was doing when you asked this question to me, tell them I was putting an elephant through the eye of a pin. So Narada again is shocked and says, okay. So he goes back and he sees the Brahmana. And the Brahmana says, oh, Narada Muni is so happy to see you. So what's the news from Narayana? And Narada was a little bit hesitant. He said, well, the Lord said that you will be in this world for many hundreds and thousands of lifetimes. You're not coming back right away. He said, what? Me? All my life I've spent doing rituals for the Lord. He said, tell me what he was doing when he told you this. And Narada said, he was putting an elephant through the eye of a pin. And the Brahmana started to laugh with derision, or with derision. Okay. So you have to look that word, or D-R-I-S-I-O-N. Is that the way you spell that word? Look it up, derision. Yeah, I think that's the right spelling. One second. No, it's not the way to spell it. What? Yeah. How do you spell it? Oh, yeah. Okay. D-E-R-I-S-I-O-N. Yes. So look this word up. Derision. It means contemptuous ridicule or mockery. So the Brahmana was like that. So he says, this is ridiculous, he said. Now I know that you are a liar, Narada Muni. So not only he doubts what Narada Muni says, but he criticizes him. So this is a great offense, right? You criticize a pure devotee. It's the first offense against the holy name. To blaspheme a devotee who's dedicated his life to propagating the holy name of the Lord. So Narada Muni is the number one person who propagates the glories of the holy name and the glories of the Lord. So Narada doesn't say anything, and he goes to see the cobbler. And when he goes to see the cobbler says, oh, Narada Muni, he offers his humble obeisances, a place to sit. He offers him some water, and he sits down humbly in front of him, and he says, please tell me about my wonderful Lord. Did you see him? And Narada says, yeah, I saw him. And he said, oh, please tell me about him. He said, well, he answered your question. He said, oh, that doesn't matter. He said, tell me about the Lord. What was he doing? How is he? And, what is it like in the Vaikuntha? He said, well, let me tell you first what he said. He said, you're coming back to him in this lifetime. He said, oh, that doesn't matter. He said, what was he doing when he said this? He said, he was putting an elephant through the eye of a pin. He said, yes, my Lord can do anything, the cobbler said. And Narada Muni was shocked. He said, how come you say this? He said, well, my dear Narada Muni, he said, I'm a cobbler, so all day long I sit under this banyan tree for a little bit of shade because it gets really hot during the day. And I make my shoes and I repair shoes and things like that, he said. But every year, the banyan tree sheds its seeds. And he said, the seed of a banyan tree. Now, he said, first of all, look how big this banyan tree is. And it just keeps getting bigger. He said, the seed of a banyan tree, however, is very small. And he gives a approximate measure of it. He said, if the Lord can put a gigantic banyan tree in this little seed, it's certainly logical that he can put an elephant through the eye of a needle. Now here, Narada Muni was really impressed. He said, because this cobbler, this shoemaker, he doesn't have any education, formal education. He just learned from his father how to make shoes and repair them. And he was just earning an honest living doing that. But simply by observing nature, such as the banyan tree, and then once a year the banyan tree sheds its seeds, and looking at the size of the seed as compared to the size of the banyan tree, he could understand that the Lord can do miraculous things. He can put a gigantic banyan tree in a little seed. So why can't he put an elephant through the eye of a needle? So see, the cobbler, although he didn't have any formal education, he was educated by honestly and humbly observing nature and seeing the miraculous things in nature. Everything starts microscopically and evolves into sometimes gigantic things like banyan trees and human beings and so forth. The human being begins microscopically and eventually becomes 5 feet or 6 feet or 7 feet or 10 feet tall. There are not so many people 10 feet tall, but there are definitely people that are 7, close to 8 feet tall. So compared to the size that they started from microscopically and becoming 8 feet tall, that's a huge growth, right? Okay, so Prabhupada tells that story, and the cobbler had faith that God has incredible abilities. And one sample of it is putting a gigantic banyan tree in a little seed. Okay, so we see that the faith of the cobbler was not blind faith. It was based on knowledge. However, it began with not blind faith, but faith in Scripture. Because even cobblers, they listen, especially to the bhajans of saints in India, such as Annamacharya, Tyagarajan, Purandara, Tulsi Das, and Shankar Das, and Assam, and other great acharyas, the Alvars and so forth, and then the Vaishnava acharyas. They've also written, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, beautiful bhajans in the local language, as well as in Sanskrit, and as well as in Telugu and Tamil and Malayalam and so forth. And by hearing these bhajans written by pure acharyas, they learn all about who Krishna is, who Narayan is, who Rama is. Just like Tulsidas wrote about Lord Rama in the Ramayana. His book is not the Ramayana; it's the Ramcharitmanas. But Valmiki wrote about Lord Rama in the Valmiki Ramayana. So they've written these books, and they've written bhajans, holy songs, glorifying the Lord's qualities and so forth. So even the common people understand or put their faith in the words of the acharyas, and obviously the topmost authority is Bhagavad Gita, with Krishna speaking directly about himself to Arjuna. So now Sanmukh continues. What is real faith? Faith in Sanskrit is Shraddha. Shraddha comes from two root words, Shrat and Dadati, meaning that which leads to truth and reality. The scriptures define faith as initial Shraddha and fixed Nishtha. Shraddha, according to Prabhupada, is shown by a person who's willing to wander into the temple and who's able to feel good about what is going on there. It sounds almost like a kind of favorable curiosity. That initial faith is enough to bring one into the association of devotees. This faith causes one to associate with pure devotees. By such association, the curiosity will develop into firm faith. This strong faith will help one receive confidential knowledge. Very good. Very good point. And that's the point. If you want to have faith and you don't have faith, then what do? You associate with people who have faith based on Vedic knowledge and sampradaya, the knowledge passed down from Krishna through the disciplic succession. By associating with people with faith in Krishna, you will develop faith in Krishna also through that association. And association with people who don't have faith in Krishna, but who have faith in science and technology and speculation, you'll develop their kind of faith in science, technology, and speculation. And if you associate with criminals and people who have no faith in God, but put their faith in their own abilities to steal, to loot, to rob, etc., then you'll become like them. So every faith depends on who, in large measure, who and what you associate with. Okay, so then he explains Shraddha. Now he's going to explain Nishtha, fixed, strong faith. Nishtha means a conviction that cannot be changed. Prabhupada writes that a devotee with such faith feels that if he can attain Krishna consciousness, all his desires will be fulfilled. A person in Nishtha might not have attained the goal, but he is fixed on its importance and value. Faith in God can only be developed by devotional service. When one has faith in Krishna, he can be eligible for further spiritual advancement. Well, looking at what you've written, Prabhupada writes that a devotee with such faith, meaning Nishtha, strong faith, feels that if he can attain Krishna consciousness, all his desires will be fulfilled. That's true, but it's better to say that one who has unflinching faith in the Lord will be blessed by the Lord to understand the deep imports or the deep meanings of the Vedic knowledge. That's a better way of understanding. All his desires will be fulfilled. Now, what if he's desiring bad things? That will be fulfilled? No. All his desires to please Krishna will be fulfilled? Yes. But not all his material desires. Because if he has, let's say, bogus material desires, why would Krishna satisfy them? He might satisfy a few of them, but he's not going to be continually satisfying material desires. But if one has pure desires to please the Lord, all those desires will be fulfilled. So you have to make that little distinction there. Okay. When one has complete faith in Krishna, he is eligible for further spiritual advancement. True. Those who have faith in Krishna are divided into three categories: Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanishta. So that was the second part of our homework, to explain the different levels of devotees based on their faith. Okay, so let's see. Sanmukh continues. He explains what is a Mahabhagavat devotee, a Madhyama Adhikari devotee, and a Kanishta Adhikari. The Uttama Adhikari, the Madhyama Adhikari, and the Kanishta Adhikari. And then he gives an example. He says, from the scriptures, an example of a person who had deep shraddha, or faith, is Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was 5 years old when he was tormented by the words of his stepmother Suruchi. This caused him to cry, and he went back to his mother Suniti to complain about his stepmom. When Dhruva's mom heard this, she said that the only refuge Dhruva had was Lord Narayana. Dhruva's faith on the words of his mother caused him to go immediately to the forest. He asked his mother, where can I find Narayana? She said, sometimes he's in the forest with great sages. So Dhruva had, he goes to the forest, and on the way he meets Narada Muni, who tries to convince him to go back home. But his strong faith led him to serve the Lord until he met the Lord face to face. The young boy, not knowing how to praise the Lord, just stood in front of the Lord and was embarrassed due to lack of spiritual knowledge. Noticing his situation, the Lord touched Dhruva's head with his conch, and Dhruva Maharaj received all the confidential knowledge. In the story, Dhruva's strong faith led him to see the Lord face to face and receive the most confidential knowledge. Very good, Sanmukh. Excellent example. We also have examples of Prahlad Maharaj and Parikshit Maharaj, who developed faith right from their mother's womb. Correct. Also, we have the example of Srila Prabhupada, who came alone to the USA with meager money, only in the 1970s, for spreading the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the impersonalists and voidists. He took this step just because he had faith on his spiritual master, Saraswati Goswami and Krishna. In just 10 years, Prabhupada built a big empire of which we are reaping the fruits of spirituality. Very good. And then, right, the different levels of devotees based on their faith. I think you already did that, but let's see what else he's saying. He does it again, yeah. And he says, faith is vital for everyone, but it is important for a devotee. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:3, Krishna says, those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me or conquer enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. Prabhupada, in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 9.3, states that without faith, one cannot attain Krishna, and that faith can be developed only by devotional service. Very good. Okay, so that was Sanmukh's homework. And he brought up some very good points and good examples. And then Ria also did her homework. And also, let's see, Shivani did homework. And Shrestha, of course, did homework. I'm going to read hers in a minute. And Shitan did homework. Let's see who else. And also Arush did his homework. And Agastya did homework. And that's about it, I think. Yeah. So today I'm going to read now. I think this is Ria's homework. Let me see what she writes. 1 second. Yeah, so she writes, faith always precedes knowledge means that faith always comes before knowledge. You need faith to achieve knowledge. An example is that a student places his or her faith in the teacher, accepting what the teacher says to be true. Then they receive knowledge. Bhagavad Gita 4.39 states, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Very good reference. In 5.17, Bhagavad Gita states, when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are always fixed on the supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. These verses from Bhagavad Gita support the phrase, faith always precedes knowledge. Very good, Ria. There are also some verses from Srimad Bhagvatam to support this phrase. Srimad Bhagvatam 7.7.17, Prahlad Maharaj says, my dear friends, if you can place your faith in my words, simply by that faith you can also understand transcendental knowledge, just like me, although you are small children. Similarly, a woman can also understand transcendental knowledge and know what is spirit and what is matter. Okay, that means everybody can understand transcendental knowledge by placing their faith in a pure devotee like Prahlad Maharaj, and obviously the purest of the purest, Lord Krishna himself. And then Srimad Bhagavatam 6.16.64 says, O king, if you accept this conclusion of mine, being unattached to material enjoyment, adhering to me with great faith, and thus becoming proficient and fully aware of knowledge and its practical application in life, you will achieve the highest perfection by attaining me. Excellent verse. And then 11.29.28 says, anyone who regularly listens to this knowledge with faith and attention, all the while engaging in my pure devotional service, will never become bound by the reactions of material work. Very good. And then 11.18.39 says, until a devotee has clearly realized spiritual knowledge, he should continue with great faith and respect and without envy to render personal service to the Guru, who is non-different from me. There are many personalities that accepted the teachings and knowledge of higher authority with faith and thus attained knowledge. Some examples are the faith that Parikshit Maharaj put in Sukadeva Goswami, the faith Prahlad's friends put in Prahlada, the faith Arjuna had in Krishna, the faith Pandavas had in Bhismadev, and the faith rishis and sages of Naimisharanya put in Sutta Goswami. All these people attain knowledge with the faith they put in their teacher, the bona fide teacher. Very good, Ria. Very, very good. Okay, so I think I'll read the letter of Prabhupada now, and then next we'll read Shrestha's homework. I can't read everybody's homework. It would probably take too much. That's why I pick and choose the homeworks that I'm going to discuss every Sunday. So, Prabhupada in 3rd of November 1974 wrote a letter to his devotee, Satsvarup Das. At that time he was Satsvarup Das Goswami, His Holiness. And he says, please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated October 15, 1974, with enclosed copies of letters and the Bengali course advertisement. So they are putting me, as well as the others, for getting the students to learn Bengali. That's nice. I'm very glad to learn that you are getting the orders and are increasing the men and parties for distributing the books regarding, meaning Prabhupada's books. Regarding the number of libraries, I read that book, the Almanac, that there are 75,000 libraries. So at this time, 1974, Srimad Maharaj at that time was in charge of putting sets of Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagvatam and Bhagavad Gita in libraries around the United States. So Prabhupada is saying, I've read in the Almanac that there are 75,000 libraries. So that means that the devotees would be distributing 75,000 sets of Bhagavatams around the United States. Now, I don't think they got into all of those libraries, but they got into many of them, and Prabhupada was very pleased by that service. Because if it's in a university or if it's in a library, people go to libraries to read books. That means that a certain number of people are going to read some of Prabhupada's books. And that's very important because they'll be introduced to Krishna consciousness that way. Regarding those professors who say that Shiva is the supreme, so this is like the real issue, because Satsvarup was going and meeting all kinds of professors in these universities. So Prabhupada is saying, regarding those professors who say that Shiva is the supreme, in the Rig Veda it is stated, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam. The lotus feet of Vishnu are the supreme devotional platform. There, Vishnu is accepted as the supreme. And Rig Veda is the original, one of the original four Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. So there it says that Lord Vishnu's lotus feet are the goal of the Vedic knowledge. There Vishnu is accepted as the supreme. So there are 18 Puranas. Now, so he just mentioned the Vedas. Now he's going to the Puranas. 6 of them are for persons in the modes of ignorance, and 6 for those in passion, and 6 are for the topmost are for those in goodness, the Sattvic Puranas. So you have Sattvic Puranas, Rajasic Puranas, and Tamasic Puranas. If one intelligently reads the Puranas and Vedas, the 4 original Vedas and the 18 Puranas, then he can understand that Vishnu is the supreme person. But for those on the stage of ignorance and passion, sometimes such statements are there. What does he mean by such statements there? That Shiva is the supreme god, or Durga is the supreme goddess. There are statements like that. Or Indra, maybe, is the supreme god. Or Brahma is the supreme god. Or Surya is the supreme god. But for those on the stage of ignorance and passion, sometimes such statements are there. So it depends on the quality of the nature of the person that one accepts Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu as the supreme. So see, this goes back to the 17th chapter, verse number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Faith depends on which quality of the modes of nature you're associating with, and that depends largely on what kind of people you're associating with. And so he says, so it depends on the quality of the nature of the person that one accepts Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu as the supreme. But one who studies scrutinizingly all the Vedic literatures and who accepts the statements of the acharyas who guide the destiny of Vedic culture of India, who also accept Vishnu as a supreme person, then he will also have the same conclusion. So he's putting everything in the Vedic literature, scrutinizingly read, and the statements of the acharyas who guide the destiny of Vedic culture of India. And they accept Vishnu as the supreme person. Then you come to the same conclusion, that Vishnu is the supreme God. So far, we are concerned. Now he's talking about Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness movement, we are preaching the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the supreme person even before all demigods, including Lord Vishnu even. And of course, now he's not saying Lord Vishnu is a demigod, but the the mundane Vedic philosophers sometimes count him as a demigod. And of course, Lord Shiva. Our fundamental principle is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is essential for anyone who's a devotee in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Our fundamental principle is the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Those persons who cannot understand this on account of particular modes of nature, such persons require further education, and until such time is fulfilled, we are helpless. So in other words, we are helpless to convince them because they're not on a level to understand the real, let's say, understand the real meaning of the Vedic literatures. To an animal in the modes of ignorance, how can we preach? Then we are helpless. So he's saying it's almost helpless. We are almost helpless when we're preaching to people who are overwhelmed with the mode of ignorance and passion. They're not capable of understanding this knowledge that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I have read your letter to the professor, and it is a good challenge. So obviously, Satsuru challenged this professor who said that Shiva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have written nicely. You have correctly cited the Vedas wherein it is stated, Eko Narayana Asin, na Brahma na Ishano. In the beginning there was no Brahma, no Shiva, only Krishna. The cosmic manifestation is from Mahat Tattva, and before the Mahat Tattva there is Narayana. Sankaracharya is a Lord Shiva worshipper and an incarnation of Lord Shiva. And he admits that Narayana is the master, and Narayana is the supreme, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. In other words, he's transcendental to the material nature. This is the best authority. What more evidence you want? This is in his Sanka Bhashya on Bhagavad Gita. So Sankaracharya wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, and in there he says Narayana Paro Vyaktat, that Narayana is transcendental to the material nature, meaning that he is the supreme God, because he's not influenced by the modes of material nature. He's transcendental to them. And whereas if you know the story of Bhrigu Muni was sent by the demigods to the spiritual world, given a duty by the demigods to figure out who of the Trimurtis, Brahma, Shiva, or Vishnu, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a long time ago that he was asked this question. And he tested Brahma, he tested Shiva, and he came back, and he tested Vishnu, and he came back and he said, there's no doubt about it, Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And also, Sankaracharya, in his Bhagavad Gita Bhashya, says, Narayana Paro Vyaktat, Andam Avyakta Sambhavam, Andasyantas Tvime Loka, Saptadvipa Chamedini. So this is in the purport to Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse number 18. It's a footnote. Prabhupada quotes this verse where it's said that Shiva Lord Shiva, who is appearing as Sankaracharya, says that Narayana is transcendental to the material creation. Therefore, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The same thing that Bhrigu Muni proved through personal experience. The same thing that Brahma says in 10th Canto, 14th chapter, 14th verse, 10, 14, 14. That Krishna is the first Narayana. And Bhisma Pitamaha also says this in Bhagavatam. He says, so Prabhupada quotes in this purport one 9:18, 1:9:18, and also quotes 10:14:14, 10.14.14. Krishna is the first Narayana. In the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, there are unlimited numbers of Narayanas who are all the same personality of Godhead and are considered to be the plenary expansions of the original personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. The first form of Lord Shri Krishna first expands himself as the form of Baladeva, and Baladeva expands in so many other forms such as Sankar, San, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Narayana, Purusha, Rama, and Nrsimha. All these expansions are one and the same Vishnu Tattva, and Shri Krishna is the original source of all the plenary expansions. He is therefore the direct personality of Godhead. He is the creator of the material world, and he is the predominating deity known as Narayana in all the Vaikuntha planets. Therefore, his movements amongst human beings are another sort of bewilderment. The Lord therefore says in the Bhagavad Gita, foolish persons consider him to be one of the human beings without knowing the intricacies of his movements. The bewilderment regarding Shri Krishna is due to the action of his twofold internal and external energies upon the third one, called marginal energy. The living entities are expansions of his marginal energy, and thus they are sometimes bewildered by the internal energy and sometimes by the external energy. By internal energetic bewilderment, Shri Krishna expands himself into unlimited numbers of Narayanas and exchanges or accepts transcendental loving service from the living entities in the transcendental world. And by his external energetic expansions, he incarnates himself in the material world among men, animals, or demigods to reestablish his forgotten relation with the living entities in different species of life. Great authorities like Bhisma, however, escape his bewilderment by the mercy of the Lord. So there you go. Wonderful purport to Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse number 18. Okay, so now Prabhupada continues. He says, and he also congratulates Satsvarupa on quoting this verse, Eko Narayana Asin na Brahmana na Brahma na Isano. In the beginning there was no Brahma, no Shiva, only Krishna. The cosmic manifestations from Mahatattva, and before the Mahatattva there's Narayana. Sankaracharya is Lord Shiva worshipper and an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and he admits that Narayana is the master and Narayana is the supreme. Narayana Parovyaktat. This is the best authority. What more evidence you want? This is in his Sanka Bhashya on Bhagavad Gita. This is not even the statement of the Puranas, but of Sankaracharya's own writings. How can you deny if the incarnation of Lord Shiva says that Krishna is supreme? Wow. And then Prabhupada continues, in the Puranas it is stated that another demigod is supreme just to convince the devotee, meaning devotee of a demigod. Just like a student in primary school, he thinks the primary education is everything and has no idea of higher education. This is to convince the devotees, but from the Gita we understand that it is from Krishna that he gives the faith by which one can worship the demigod. So that's a verse in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna fixes the faith of the devotees of the demigods, so they worship the demigod. Why does he do that? Well, let me tell you which verse that is first. That is 9th chapter, verse 23. Those who are devotees of other gods, meaning the demigods, and who worship them with faith, actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, persons who are engaged in the worship of demigods are not very intelligent, although such worship is offered to me indirectly. Why? Because anything offered to a demigod, the demigod offers it to Krishna. And if the devotee who is worshiping the demigod asks for a material benediction, Krishna is the one that gives it to the demigod, who can give it to his devotee. The demigods are powerless to give any benediction without receiving it first from Krishna. For example, when a man pours water on the leaves and branches of a tree without pouring water on the root, he does so without sufficient knowledge or without observing regulative principles. Similarly, the process of rendering service to different parts of the body is to supply food to the stomach. The demigods are, so to speak, different officers and directors in the government of the Supreme Lord. One has to follow the laws made by the government, not by the officers or directors. Similarly, everyone is to offer his worship to the Supreme Lord only. That will automatically satisfy the different officers and directors of the Lord. The officers and directors, meaning the demigods, are engaged as representatives of the government, and to offer some bribe to the officers and directors is illegal. This is stated here as avidhi purvakam. In other words, Krishna does not approve the unnecessary worship of the demigods. Okay. So, and Prabhupada next says, this is to convince the devotees of the demigods, but from the Gita we understand that it is from Krishna that he gives the faith by which one can worship the demigods. So even the faith that people have in the demigods, it comes from Krishna, not from the demigod himself. Krishna says, Aham adihi devanam, meaning that I am the origin of all the demigods. There's another verse in Bhagavad Gita. Aham adihi devanam. Let me tell you where that is. Tenth chapter, second verse. Aham adirhi devanam. So now, he says, is Krishna speaking a lie when he says, I am the origin of all the demigods? And then Krishna says, Matak parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. Nobody is greater than me, he says. Why should we reject Krishna's statements? Our mission is to put Krishna as first, and they may take it or not. We do not interfere with their choice, but we do it as our duty. I hope this meets you in good health. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. So, Matak parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. That is the 9th chapter also, I think. Yes. No, I'm sorry. That is the 7th chapter. Verse number, what? Verse number 7. 7th chapter, verse 7. Matak parantaram nanyat. Aham adir hidevanam. 9th chapter, verse number 23. No, I'm sorry. Not. 1 second. Let me. I just mentioned that. I forgot it already. 10th chapter, 2nd verse. Okay. So 10th chapter, 2nd verse, and 7th chapter, 7th verse. Prabhupada is quoting them. Okay, so the main thing in Prabhupada's letter to Satsvarup is that so far we are concerned in the Krishna consciousness movement, we are preaching the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the Supreme Person even before all demigods, including Lord Shiva even, and of course Lord Shiva. Our fundamental principle is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay? So that should be our bottom line. That should be our baseline of faith. We place our faith in Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita as it is, yatarup, as it is. Okay, so now we know, why are we going through this, but now we know where our faith should be placed. It should be placed in Krishna's statements in Bhagavad Gita, as it is. Okay, so then, I'm going to read now Shrestha's homework, which was very, very well done. First of all, let me put this Hamadir Dinar is 10.2 and Mata Parantam Nanyat 7.7. And Eko Narayana Asin Nabramana Ishano is quoted in Bhagavad Gita. Let me see where that is. That is 5th chapter. That is the 5th chapter. Fifth chapter, 8th verse. Okay. All these things are quoted in Bhagavad Gita by Srila Prabhupada. All right. So now, let's go on to Shrestha's homework. One second. Okay, Shrestha's homework. Okay, here's my homework for today. Research the statement, faith always precedes knowledge, and give references from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam which support this statement. Reference 1.16.20 and Bhagavad Gita 17.2-6. Write the different levels of devotees based on their faith. Okay, point 1. Research the statement, faith always precedes knowledge. Faith always precedes knowledge is actually a material philosophical assertion. Well, she's giving a little history of this. That's not the origin of it, but she says, is actually a material philosophical assertion that to really know something, you first must have firm faith and belief in it. The material philosophers use this assertion as a part of their tripartite theory to define knowledge. However, the material philosophy does not refer to the Lord in any aspect and is therefore incomplete. The class of rationalists, who are a specific section of philosophers, believe that whatever you think is correct. They believe that faith is whimsical and that you can believe something without any basis and it will be true. The rationalists have come up with this definition because they believe that empirical knowledge cannot be the means of understanding knowledge. They have a so-called universal assertion. The general idea behind the belief condition is that you can only know what you believe. These rationalists are correct that empiricism is an untrustworthy process, but they do not understand that there is a Vedic means of acquiring real knowledge which starts with faith in the Vedic injunctions, which are unwavering truths. They decide to follow Anumana Pramana, placing their faith on random thoughts of ideas rather than follow Shabda Purana, placing their faith on the Vedas and living life by those injunctions. Okay, so very good. She gives an introduction of improper or incomplete theories that faith precedes knowledge. First, by the tripartite theory that Plato presented, I think it was Plato, of how if something is true, and how can you determine what is knowledge? So he came up with this tripartite theory. And then, speaking of the rationalists who believe whatever you think can be true, and then she comes to statements of the Vedas, which are unwavering truths, that a priori truths that one should place their faith in. This same phrase, faith precedes knowledge, can be described in a Vedic perspective, which is always correct due to its direct correlation with the Supreme Lord. In the Vedas, real knowledge is explained. That knowledge is authentic because its object is loving devotional service and faith in the Lord. The Vedic aspect of faith always precedes knowledge is that faith in the Lord is more important than having knowledge. You may have knowledge, but if you don't have faith in the Lord, then the very purpose of that knowledge is defeated. In the Vedas, there are many examples of the Lord and his devotees explaining the importance of faith over knowledge. These are some examples of faith preceding knowledge. So one thing we have to get straight, and when we speak of the Vedic literatures, now you just had an example where Prabhupada says there are the original 4 Vedas, and then there are the 18 Puranas. But 6 of those Puranas are for people in the mode of ignorance, 6 are for those in the mode of passion, and 6 are for those in the mode of goodness. So when we speak about we base everything on Vedic knowledge, we have to have a little clarification of that. For in Krishna consciousness, the highest authority, the highest Vedic authority is Krishna. How do we know that? Bhagavad Gita 15:15, where it says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivisto matak smritir jnanam apahanam cha vedaischa sarver aham eva veda. That's the key. Krishna says that I am the knower of the Vedas. And of all the Vedas, I am the goal. That's what he says. And then he says, Vedaischa sarver aham eva veda. Of all the Vedas, I am the goal. Vedanta Krit, I know the Vedas. Vedanta Krit, I compiled the Vedas, and Vedanta Krit Vedavit, and I know the Vedas. So this Vedaischa sarver aham eva vedya is the most important statement in the Bhagavad Gita for the devotee, because Krishna says, I'm the goal of the Vedas. So the Vedas are vast. In some parts of the Vedas, it may say that Shiva is the supreme god. In other parts of the Vedas, it may say that Brahma is the supreme god, or Durga is the supreme god. But the highest Vedic authority is Krishna, who is the goal of the Vedas, who compiled the Vedas, and who knows the Vedas. That's the most important thing for our basis of authority and truth and faith in Krishna consciousness. Okay. So now, Shreshtha says there are some examples of faith preceding knowledge. In the Svatasvatara Upanishad 6.23, she's quoting a verse, she reads the English translation. The real import of the scriptures is revealed to one who has unflinching faith in both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master. So unflinching faith in Krishna and Guru. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tata Kuru Tasyaite Katitahi Artak Prakasante Mahatmanaha. It's a very important verse quoted in the purport Bhagavad Gita, and one that you should definitely know, because this is the quintessential authority for faith precedes knowledge. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir, it is 6th chapter, 47th verse in the purport. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by bhakti yoga, as is confirmed in all Vedic literatures. Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tata Guru Tasyaite Katita Hi Artak Prakasante Mahatmanha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit means unwavering, undoubting faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. And then Prabhupada also quotes the Gopala Tapana Upanishad. So first he's giving the Svatastapara Upanishad, then he gives us another verse from the Gopala Tapani Upanishad. It says, Bhaktir asya bhajanam tad iha mutro bhadi nairasyena musmim manak kalpanam itad eva naiskarmyam. Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord, which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or in the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb the mind in the Supreme Lord. That is the purpose of Naiskarmyam, Gopala Tapani Upanishad. So, when you give evidence from the Upanishads, that's the highest authority for the Vedic scholars. But for us, the highest authority is Krishna's Bhagavad Gita itself. Okay. So then, Shrestha writes, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 22.62, Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. If I'm not mistaken, that is Shraddha Sabde Vishwasakai Surhida Nischai. Let's see if that's right. Shraddha Sabde Vishwasakai Surhida. Bhagavad Gita quoted in 2nd chapter, verse number 41. And also, I think in the Madhya Lila, 2262. Shraddha Sabde Vishwasakaya Shrida Nishchai Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma Kritahai. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions. Notice he says family traditions. He doesn't say family. Family traditions, like in my family, one of our traditions was every Sunday we must have chicken. Well, we're not obliged to follow that tradition when you join Krishna consciousness. But it's a family tradition. It's just like another family tradition we had in my family was every Sunday, along with eating chicken and rice, we also had to have a toast. And the toast was with whiskey. And my father would force me to drink a little bit of whiskey. I used to hate it, but it was a family tradition. So, if your family tradition is to eat meat, if your family tradition is to worship Lord Shiva, if your family tradition is to smoke marijuana, according to this verse, we're not beholden to such family traditions. It doesn't mean you reject your family, but you reject those traditions that are in violation of Krishna consciousness. So one time, my uncle came to France after I had become a devotee, and he contacted me and invited me to a family dinner because he had his relatives there and he was my uncle. So I very hesitatingly went. I didn't want to go. I knew him. I knew what he was like, and he's a fanatic. But I thought, it's my uncle. He's come all this way. So I took a couple plates of prasadam with me and went to see him. And it was a family dinner, and there was a big table, and everyone was there. It's my uncle and his family, and he had relatives in France. And we were all sitting down, and then my uncle wants to do a toast. So he picks up his tumbler of whiskey and asks everyone else to pick up their glass. And I didn't pick mine up. And he looked at me real sternly and said, "Pick it up." So I picked it up. And then he made some toast, some goofy thing, and he said, "Okay." And then everyone drank, and I threw it over my shoulder like that. And he didn't quite see it. He was so busy drinking his. And then he passed around the meat. There was about 6 different types of meat, chicken and this and that. And when he passed it to me, I just passed it on to the next person. So then he saw this and he got really angry. He says, "Take some." And I said, "Well, I don't eat meat." He said, "What do you mean you don't eat meat? You used to eat meat. This is your family. You have to follow what we do." He was like really adamant. And I kept saying, but in a soft voice, "I can't do that. But I brought some of my own food that I'll eat." And I said, "Would you like some of this?" He said, "No, I don't want any of that. You take my food, then I might take your food." I said, "No, I can't do that." So he was really upset, and he went into a tirade. But then, sort of calmed down. But he put me on the spot, and I was not willing to budge because I would violate Prabhupada's instructions. So those are very extreme situations. Hopefully you'll never have to be in such a situation. So faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When it says something sublime, you may not see it, you may not touch it, but you know it exists. So what is that sublime thing? It is the existence of the spiritual world, the existence of Krishna, and the truth of the Vedic knowledge, and the statements of the Acharyas. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruitive activities are the engagements of one's reactions from past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activities. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, for they are no longer subject to dualities like good and bad. The highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. This state is automatically achieved by progressive Krishna consciousness. So here you have 2nd chapter, verse number 41, extremely important point. And he's quoting the verse, Shada Sabde Vishwasa Kahe, which is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, Madhya 2262, that Shesta quotes here as an example of faith preceding knowledge. And then she quotes Bhagavad Gita 647, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion, Krishna says. So that's a very famous verse. And we quoted the other verse from the purport of that verse. Yoginam api sarve samadgatanantaratmana shadavam sadame shadavam bhajate yomam same yukta mato matak. And then she quotes Bhagavad Gita 439, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme peace. So that is the 4th chapter, 39th verse. Shadava labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriya. Jnanam ladva param santim achiran adigachati. Very important verse. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, well, the verse is, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses, you notice all these verses starting with faith, is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Prabhupada says, such knowledge and Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness he can attain the highest perfection. See, now, Sanmukh said one can attain all their desires, but actually this is the correct way of understanding. That simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls the senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. So then, Shrestha quotes Srimad Bhagvatam 127, by rendering devotional service with faith unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the material world. That's a famous verse, and that Savai Pumsa Paro Dharmo Yato Bhak. No, it's not that. It's the one after that, and that is, 1 second, let me just see. That is verse number 7, I think. Yeah. Verse number 7 says, 1 second. Yeah. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Gyanayat Yasavairagyam Gyanam Chayad Ahaitukam. By rendering devotional service unto the personality Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So, when it says, by rendering devotional service with faith unto the personality Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment. And then she quotes a lecture by Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk, July 21st, 1975 in San Francisco. Prabhupada says, just like I do not know where this pathway goes, but you show me this way. So without faith, how can I go? If I have no faith, then I cannot move even an inch. I believe, yes, he is all right, let me go. This is faith. I do not know whether it is going, where it is going, which way it is going. So without faith, you cannot move an inch. So faith must be there. Either it is true or blind. Faith is the moving force. Only with faith can you do anything. That is faith. Means on knowledge. So faith with knowledge is very good. But beginning must be faith, with knowledge or without knowledge. Prabhupada is directly saying that faith comes before knowledge. Yeah, so when you buy an airline ticket to go from Seattle to Mumbai, you don't know if the plane is going to arrive there safely. But you have faith that it will. That's why you buy the ticket. If you did not have faith that that plane would arrive safely, you would never, even if they gave you the ticket for free, get on that plane. You have to have faith. And it precedes knowledge. And you only know if the plane arrives, if it arrives safely with you in Mumbai. Then you have the knowledge. So Prabhupada's point is, so faith must be there. It is either is true or blind. Faith is the moving force. Only with faith can you do anything. So if you develop the faith that America is finished, it's going to fall apart, what would you do? You would leave. You'd get out as soon as you can. Go somewhere else where you have faith that it's not going to fall apart. But as long as you have faith that America is not going to fall apart, no matter how bad the situation is, then you stay, you see. But the real faith should be placed in the statements of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada said in his letter to Satsvarup. He said that so far we are concerned in the Krishna consciousness movement, we are preaching the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the supreme person even before all demigods, including Lord Vishnu even, and of course Lord Shiva. Our fundamental principle is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Those persons who cannot understand this on account of particular modes of nature, such persons require further education, and until such time is fulfilled, we are helpless. To an animal in the modes of ignorance, how can we preach? Then we are helpless. So, Prabhupada says, our mission is to put Krishna as first, and they may take it or not. We do not interfere with their choice, but we do it as our duty. No one is greater than me, Krishna says. Why should we reject Krishna's statement? Okay, so then to finish, Shrestha, now in your homework, 1 second, this thing is... Then she says, all these examples show how faith always precedes knowledge. You may not have knowledge, or it may not be available to you, but by placing faith in the Lord, then you can progress, and that knowledge will be revealed to you. This is stated in Sritasvatara Upanishad 6.2. Actually, the whole process of developing prema, or love of God, begins with ados shraddha, or meager faith. This is stated in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.4.15 to 16. When one gets this little faith in the devotees, this ultimately begins their spiritual journey. Therefore, as it is seen, faith is ultimately more important than knowledge. Well, you have to have faith in something that's true, and our baseline scripture in which we put our complete faith in is Bhagavad Gita, because it's Krishna speaking directly about himself. Okay, then the next part of the homework was write the different levels of devotees based on their faith. There's Kanistadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, Uttamadhikari. Okay, very good, Shrestha. So we went over this. Now, homework for next week is you're going to write an essay, a more complete essay, very similar to what Shrestha has done, what Sanmukh has done, and put down not only the English translations of the verses, but the Sanskrit translations, and memorize them. It's like I can quote those verses. You should be able to quote those verses because it's the basis of your faith in Krishna consciousness. So go over all of these references that I've given today. Listen to this lecture again. I looked up all the references. I showed you where they are. Most of them are in the Bhagavad Gitas and also mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagvatam. And look up this letter by Prabhupada, written on 3rd November 1974 to His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. This is the most important thing for a person who's in Krishna consciousness. And if you develop this unflinching faith in the statements of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, that will last the rest of your life, and you'll never be misled. So better learn it now than later. I had to learn it later in life. Why shouldn't you learn it early in life? Because if you do, you will avoid many, many problems in life, and you will avoid being misled, just like you just saw this past weekend. Thousands and thousands of people were misled to put all their energy and faith in protesting. Now, is the reason why they're protesting wrong? Not necessarily. When they're protesting about police brutality or unfair unfair prejudice against certain class of people, etc. Those are somewhat legitimate purposes. But the real thing, does not end up in looting and burning and so forth. The real thing ends up in coming closer to God, coming closer to Krishna, and coming closer to the statements of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. If it just comes to a political goal, then it's not going to fix any problem. They've been trying to fix this problem of slavery since the beginning of the United States, and then the Civil War, and then 1960s with opening up schools and getting rid of limitations on what black people can do, and this thing and that thing. It doesn't work. The only thing that works is coming to Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, believing the words of the Lord, and practicing Krishna consciousness, devotional service, chanting Hare Krishna. That works because that changes the heart of a person from the material conception of life to the spiritual conception. Without that change, no solution will work. No political action will work. No violent action will work. Just like violently, the communist regime in the Soviet Union tried to stamp out religion, and it didn't work. Even though they had absolute power for 85, 90 years, it didn't work. As soon as the communist regime in Russia collapsed, religion came back again. So you cannot stamp something out with violence, with political solutions. You cannot, but you have to change the hearts of people from the material conception to the spiritual conception, from accepting imperfect authorities to accepting a perfect authority such as Krishna, and who is infallible. All other authorities in the material world are fallible. Therefore, following their advice, you will not get to the truth. You will get maybe to some part of the truth, but not the whole truth, and it'll be a failure. So, therefore, that's your homework. Go through all these references. Hear this lecture again, where I tell you what the references are. Quote the Sanskrit as well as the English, and go to Prabhupada's letter, November 3rd, 1974. If you go to Prabhupada Letters on the internet, it'll take you there, and look up 1974, and then you look up 74-11-10, or November 3rd, 1974, and you'll see the letter to Srimad Maharaj. Read that letter very carefully, because that is a statement, ultimate statement of faith in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions, Daniel? Okay. Is it your birthday? How did I guess? Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Pati Srimad